Hi, Renee. Welcome to the show. It is a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me. I think we have a really exciting topic to cover today, and I just can't wait to sink our teeth into it.
I am more than in agreement. I am very, very excited to talk about this topic as well. And, it's funny because as you and I were chatting off air, we hear a lot about fasting, but this is something different and something that I was not really that privy to prior to learning about you and Prolon and all the things. And so I'm really excited to bring this information to our listeners because, again, like it was something that I didn't really know a lot about. So I'm very, very excited.
Absolutely. And I'm always, most people haven't heard about this. So you are not alone here. But at the same time, it always is so shocking to me that it is still so under wraps because the research behind this has been going back about 30 years. There's over 40 clinical trials. This is not new. Not to mention that fasting, just as a general concept, has been around since our very first early days of humankind. So this isn't so new, but certainly the concept that we're going to really start unpeeling today of fasting mimicking is newer, but still has got decades behind it.
Yeah, that's so true. It's such a good point that you just made because, I feel like in recent years or recent decades, people have really honed in on fasting. It almost can sort of seem like a quote unquote trend, but the reality is that fasting has been going on for, centuries. And, it's even it's a very, like it's a biblical practice. There's just a lot there. So it's definitely not new. You're so right.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the reason why it is so beneficial to our bodies because as much time as there has been from our early days of human evolution to where we are today, things haven't really changed that much. And there's a lot of these things that our bodies evolved to do early on that we still have. And we really just still need to tap into to get all of these benefits from that our body just has innately from those early days. So because for so long of our history, food wasn't readily available, it really is something that our body can thrive within if done right.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So, before we kind of get into all of the details, why don't you first off just let us know a little bit about you? How did you get here? Like, what got you from, because you're a dietitian,
Yep.
but I feel like you're specialized. There's a little bit of a
Mhm.
focus with you. And so, how did you get to this point where you started? I'm assuming that at some point you were working with clients or you still
Yeah.
are, and then like kind of moved into this area.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, you can start all sorts of ways in my history. I mean, prior to even becoming a dietitian, I was pre-med and going down that route and just thinking I was going to go into emergency medicine. Ended up doing some medical missions. I did Nicaragua, South Africa, and it all just when you actually live the job that you think you want to do you start maybe volunteering or doing all of these opportunities where you really get to experience it, your eyes get opened to what is my life going to be and what would my role be and what would I be leveraging in my role. And I kept being kind of confronted by the fact that a lot of it was just very medication driven and while there absolutely is a place and a need for that in medicine, it wasn't resonating with me as much as the concept of prevention through lifestyle intervention. And so that's when my eyes really became open. I started digging into this. I actually became a nutritionist first, and we could talk all day about the differences between nutritionists and dietitians, but I just started as a nutritionist first, working with clients, giving meal plans, just learning the basic ropes of nutrition. And then from there realized, okay, I really love this concept of not just living longer, but living healthy longer. And it turns out that there is a master's program out of USC that was in part created by somebody by the name of Dr. Walter Longo. Dr. Walter Longo is one of the leading longevity researchers today and has just so much incredible background and research and science behind his work. And so, of course, I was drawn to that program, and as such became what we call longevity dietitians. So dietitians that have master's degree in not just nutrition, but nutrition, health span, and longevity. Health span being that concept of lifespan plus the concept of health during that extended lifespan. And and so from there, really learning from Dr. Walter Longo and even going to Italy where he's based, studying at the University of Genoa, where we learned about fasting mimicking, the biochemistry of aging, and all of the components that really allow you to understand how we age, why we age, and of course, interventions to try and support healthy aging. Because we're never going to be able to prevent aging, but we can certainly improve the way that we age.
Yeah, wow. That is so good. And I love the point that you made a minute or two ago, which is about like regarding living longer. Because I
Mhm.
feel like everyone talks about living longer,
Mhm.
but who wants to live longer when they're not living well? Like
Exactly.
you want to be able to live well, say to, up towards 100 or whatever it is, right? I'm not sure the exact number. But if you're on a bunch of medications and you're not well and you're not mobile and all the things, then I mean, is it really living? Not
Right.
really.
And I think that a lot of people actually have this pushback on the concept of living long and longevity because of the fear that they will not be able to do it after the age of 60 or 70 or 80. And so at that point, there's so many people. I mean, we get asked a lot of the time in the podcast world, like, oh, so especially in the longevity world. So how long do you plan on living to? And and you'll hear people across the spectrum saying all sorts of things. But a lot of people saying, 80, 70, and those numbers are the ones that really hurt me because I know that is you're choosing that number under the assumption that you can't be healthy past those ages.
Yeah.
And you absolutely can.
I feel like there's a lot of messaging there, and that is, I don't know, like we're almost programmed to uh, settle into that mindset.
Mhm.
And that's a whole rabbit hole that I I could probably go down with you right now, but I just feel like the paradigm that we're in, the conventional paradigm that we're in, is
Yeah.
really sets us up for failure because it's
Mhm.
like, oh, it's expected, right? It's expected that you should be on, 4 to 6 medications by the time you're 70. I
Mhm.
mean, I think about my mom, she's had her trials here and there, but just as an example, is she's had a couple appointments here and there to her regular doctor over the last however long year or two, and when they've asked about medications, when she says none, they're shocked, which is
Right.
so crazy to me because she's like, why are they so shocked? Like, I don't know. And it's clearly because most people are sick care managed. They're in the sick care
Mhm.
management stage at that time, and it's just expected and it's normal, but it's not really normal. It's just common.
It's very and not I think this number will surprise most listeners. 93% of Americans are considered cardio-metabolically unhealthy. 93%. That means that 7%, that's it, of Americans are considered metabolically healthy. That is an outrageous statistic. And it really and understandably, like I mean, oh, it's probably easy for especially dietitians and for healthcare practitioners to kind of sometimes sit on our high horses and say, you could do so much. There's all these lifestyle changes, but I mean, it's if the numbers are that staggering, there are other things at play. It is not just how do you have your own internal motivation to achieve these things? No, we've been set up for failure by the system that is in place, the food systems that are in place, socioeconomic factors that are in place. I mean, there are so many pieces to this puzzle that need to be considered. And so today, absolutely, I will be focusing on some of these lifestyle changes that you can make in terms of nutrition changes that you can make, but that is not the only problem here. There are so many other problems that are setting us up for those staggering numbers.
Well said. And I totally agree with you. And I think just sitting with so many experts like yourself over the last 2 years or so here, that is very evident, right? It's not just one thing and there's not just one answer to the problem, right? It's
Mhm.
so multifactorial and there's so many things that play into it. And that sounds overwhelming for some people. But I think the beauty of it, if you really look at that, is
Mhm.
wow. Well, if there's so many factors here, then there's also so many different ways that you could apply solutions that could make an impact to your life, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because one thing that, as I would argue, most dietitians would say is that the best intervention is the one that you will do. And so, even, sure, like I said, I'm going to be talking about a specific nutrition intervention that I think is awesome. Even if that doesn't resonate with you, maybe right now, maybe ever, what does? What is something that you can change today? And maybe it's something little or something that you feel is little, but I can almost guarantee you that if you do it and if you make that change and if you make, a conscious effort to check back in on that, every day or even every other day or once a week, that will continue to propel you to make future changes down the line. And, there's some really cool research, especially in nutrition that compares weight loss results and they've checked all of the diets that are out there, whether it be low carb or ketogenic or low calorie or vegan or what have you, and a lot of them have very similar outcomes as long as the person does them. It is just this change and this mindfulness and this willingness to make a difference in your nutrition, and it's very likely because if you just eat the standard American diet, unfortunately, in shorthand is the SAD diet,
Yeah.
SAD, if you're just choosing that, then you're very likely eating very high amounts of refined grains, high amounts of sugar, high amounts of unhealthy fats, and you're just, you're being again set up for failure. And so just being a little bit mindful in whatever direction feels right for you can make a really big difference.
Yeah, it's so true. It's consistency. And we all see that, I mean, even me, I've been sort of walking through this wellness, this wellness space for a couple decades, and I still struggle with consistency with certain things. But I always have to remind myself of the small changes that I have made, or the little things, because those little things can be very impactful. It's just consistency over a longer period of time, and I think that
Yeah.
starting it sometimes is the hardest thing,
Yeah.
but it's like, and this gets brought up a lot on the show, but when people throw a million things at the wall, you're going to fail because it's just not
Yeah.
sustainable to just overhaul your entire life or switch everything around. That's so overwhelming and it's just not going to be helpful for you in the end.
Absolutely. And I am just as much a victim to that as anybody else. I'll come in every new year and I'll have my list of all of the things that I'm hoping to achieve in, 2025. And of course, if you have a list of 15 things, and I'm not even saying that it's bad to have, 15 things that you might want to achieve for the year, but maybe for the month of January, what is the number one priority item on that list that I am going to focus on? And just pick one of those things. And then, I mean, we could have a whole
Yes.
chat about goal setting and the best way to set goals and the best way to achieve said goals. But yeah, just, it could be a little thing. And when we talk about longevity, the things that matter are sometimes things that surprise people, including community engagement and social situation and just having, some warmth in friends and family around you in that community. That is a big one. So if that's something that you want to spend more time on, that can have a really great impact on your health. Sleep. If you just adjust your sleep schedule, maybe plan to get an extra hour or go to bed an hour earlier than usual. Those are just these little things that most people I think can achieve in their day to day. And if you can achieve that for 30 days, for even 7 days, then you will very likely get this additional just intrinsic motivation to do something else next.
So well said. And I have to say, just on a personal note, that I love that you brought up the community piece. And I just want to throw this out here before we really dive into
Yeah.
all the things, right? But that was actually something that I told myself at the beginning of this year that I was going to be more in tune with because,
Hmm.
and this would be like, a 4 hour podcast, but there have been some things in my life that have really brought me into more of a living a little bit more of a solo type of life, a little bit more isolated.
Hmm.
Again, there's a lot of detail here. And it's not that I don't talk to people throughout the day. It's not, but there's been a little bit of an isolation factor for me. Some of it is, well, a lot of it is actually just some physical stuff I'm recovering from, things of that nature, moving away from family. There's multiple things in here. And I thought to myself, as much as like people are busy and all the things, it's also on me to reach out more and to maybe get more involved and to be more in community. And so the fact that and I've realized just again from a personal perspective that these changes, like nutrition, all of the sleep, all of those things are amazing things to implement, but there's also a lot of other things that you can think about, sit down with, or prioritize that aren't the standard things that come to mind, like
Yeah.
food or sleep or exercise. So I
Mhm.
love, love, love that you brought that up.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, what I especially love about community is especially if you're surrounding yourself with a community that is there to lift you up and help you succeed and help you grow, they will inevitably help you achieve your next goal. And it takes a village, right? We're not going to be able to do everything alone. And I think we usually, especially in the United States, and I'm Canadian and it's a problem there too, um, that we feel like we have to do everything all by ourselves. And that if we don't, then we're not strong or we're not tough. But you can ask for help and it will make you in fact succeed and oftentimes succeed even better or stronger or quicker because you have the additional help and because community is so important, you are giving value to your friends and family when they are able to help you succeed because they feel good that they made a change in someone that they care about life. So, asking for help and building that community, it has rippling effects to your health and wellness and longevity. And so when you really start again unpacking this, you start to see why community is such a piece of longevity. So,
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Lots of wisdom there. And I love how we just kind of tangented it because it really is important. And
yeah.
like I said, it struck a personal chord with me in a good way. Right. So
Yeah.
I was just like, that's so awesome that you just mentioned that. Really, really important. Really
Yeah.
important.
I mean, if we're gonna talk about fasting and fasting mimicking, and it's important for me for the audience to know that this is a tool. This is something that I think is really valuable, but it's not the only tool. And
Yeah.
I as a dietitian and as a longevity dietitian, that holistic view is so important. And we'll focus in on something today, but
Yeah.
there's a big picture.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're a gem in the sea of dietitians because not everyone has that perspective. So the fact that you have this zoomed out lens and you're able to really just speak from, like you said, a holistic perspective is so important because I think some people are so dialed in that they tend to forget the other areas that can be, of equal or even sometimes more value. So again,
Yeah.
super, super important stuff. So as we sort of gear towards, the meat, I should say, of this episode, I kind of want to approach this fasting conversation with, some of the main reasons why, number one, people should think about potentially going down this road. And also, what do you think is happening metabolically? Because you mentioned the 93%. Okay, that's so massive. It's
Hmm.
so sad, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what do you think is really contributing? I mean, obviously it's going to be food focused here, but
Mhm.
is it one or two or three things within the food category? Like, what is really going on?
Yeah, man. I really don't like pinpointing one specific thing or villainizing one specific thing, but I'm going to mention a couple of things that I think are one of the biggest problem today. And it might not be what you think, actually. I'm one thing that I think is really under discussed that is causing a big problem here is that we are being told that calorie restriction is the answer to weight loss. And while there is truth to that. And while calorie restriction, in fact, a lot of research around calorie restriction shows really longevity impacts, great longevity impacts, it can be dangerous, especially if done over long periods of time. And when we are just kind of blanketly doing long-term calorie restriction, what oftentimes happens is that we start tapping into muscle. And so the weight loss isn't just fat loss, it is also muscle loss. And so, in all of our efforts to do the quote unquote right thing, we are oftentimes setting our bodies up for a vicious cycle of weight loss and weight regain because the muscle is one of the most metabolically active tissues in our body, meaning that, we hear about metabolism, metabolism. Metabolism is that thing that, the higher your metabolism, the more energy your body uses, and the easier it is for you to lose weight. And so everybody has muscle, right? But if you're breaking it down and you're losing it, you're dropping your metabolism that could be effectively quite a bit higher. And so, yeah, I mean, and also just to mention, in today's world with GLP-1s and all of the weight loss medications, those are also about 40% of the weight that is being lost with those GLP-1s is from your muscle.
Yeah.
And so it's just that is one of the biggest things that I think is really causing problem is that we are really so focused on weight loss, but we are not specifying the kind of weight loss that we're trying to achieve. The other thing that I think is really important or is possibly causing a lot of issue is insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, for those that might be a new term, is essentially our body is able to use sugar that we consume. And sugar is actually, it's pretty much any carbohydrates that you eat. So it doesn't always have to be like a cake or a cookie. It can be all sorts of things across the spectrum. I'm not villainizing carbohydrates, by the way. I'm a big fan of, fruits and whole grains and all those wonderful things. But especially refined carbohydrates. What happens is that our body has all of this sugar, and our bodies were not designed to have as much of those refined carbohydrates and sugars as we have today. It's in absolutely everything. Your ketchup is loaded with sugar. Your breads nowadays are loaded with sugar. It's things that you might not expect that don't necessarily initially seem like a sweet thing are just jam-packed. And so our body is just getting punched constantly with sugar, and it doesn't after a little while, it doesn't know what to do with it. And it just lets it float in our blood. And what is happening is that sugar is actually causing damage because it's not being filtered away into our cells, where it can be used for energy and used for really wonderful things. But if it just sits around and is unused, it just creates havoc and it starts wrecking things in our system, leading to insulin resistance, but also inflammation and all of these other, buzzwords that we're hearing right now. But in essence, it's coming just from this excess of blood glucose or blood sugar that is occurring. And again, I want to say it loud and clear. It is not just the cookies and the cakes and the things that we might initially connect to high blood sugar. It is a lot of things in our pantries, in our fridge, at the restaurants. It's getting snuck in all over the place.
Yeah. It is really an important note to take into consideration that you could really be a very healthy eater. Or you could think that you're I mean, there's degrees here, but you can think that you're a healthy eater. Or you can even be a healthy eater and stay away from certain foods and so forth. And you can still have a considerable problem in this area or a concern of insulin resistance. And I was thinking, if there's people listening right now and they're going, well, like, how would I know? Like, how would I know if I'm having, or like maybe I'm on the cusp of like kind of going into this territory and I don't want to go into this territory? What would be some of the things that they might want to pay attention to or some symptoms of that?
I am so glad you asked that question because insulin resistance, and the reason why I believe it is such a problem is because it's very hard to know when it's happening. It is very hard to tell when your body is going through insulin resistance. But what you might find is that you are always hungry. Even though you just ate, your body is just not really, it's not efficiently using the energy that you're giving it. There's all sorts of things that you might not expect, like even having to go to the bathroom more frequently, or there's all sorts of these little things that you might not necessarily expect. But that's why I would say do not skip on your doctor's visits. And you can ask for these tests. You can ask for an insulin resistance assessment. It's something called HOMA IR that is used to measure this. And so, even if it's just once a year, just go in and get the information and see how you're doing, because it is very much one of these kind of hidden things that are going on. And because our body is so incredibly powerful, I mean, the more I spend time in the world of health and wellness, the more I have awe and amazement to what our bodies can do. And they are there to help us push through and thrive during even, long periods of us just beating it up. And so, it's okay that you're not going to capture it or see it or notice it, but, let's take the effort and time to, pop in, get our blood checked once a year and ideally twice a year. But hey, we'll take what we can get to just get a picture of what's going on inside.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's incredible advice. And I think I've actually been thinking about this currently because I've been having some conversations revolving other friends' blood work and so forth. And I'm like, wow, I think it's almost time for me to maybe get a little bit more detailed. And, some people have this issue, just side note, some people have this issue with, going to their doctor and requesting certain tests and them not being able to get these tests.
Yes.
But I would say that if, if it's a concern, it might be worth, maybe pulling a little bit or prioritizing a little bit more out of your pocket to get these tests done or just push for them in a way. There are different ways you can do this, but it's in, the snapshot of blood work can be super helpful and really just open a door where you might need to look. Otherwise, like you said, you wouldn't have no idea if you didn't have that test done.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, and definitely if you start recognizing that your body is not as efficient in doing the things that it did before, which can be all sorts of things, right? But even if you feel like your sleep is being impacted or, anything along the lines of just the way that your body behaves, if you see a decline, it's your body telling you, hey, can we look into this? Can we spend some time here? So, not trying to create hypochondriacs here, but
No.
definitely just give your body, listen to your body and listen to its cues to just look in and try and get a little bit more answers.
Yeah, yeah, really, really, really well said. And I just want to throw something else out because again, this is coming from personal experience. So and it's important sometimes that I share this kind of stuff because if it's applicable or if it's something that I've experienced, then chances are it might be something that someone needs to hear. Is that I think it's really critical that people take that question and not just apply it to, for example, you don't have to be overweight or you don't have to be, inactive. You can be what you consider to be very fit or even thin. Mind you, thin does not equal healthy. And you could still have these little, messengers that are trying to talk to you, these little things that are happening. I am someone I've been in a very interesting situation for a few years. I have lost some muscle, lost some weight, have seen my body sort of change, like you were just speaking to, maybe not handling things as well as it used to. Again, with this whole journey I've been on, there's also a lot of mental and emotional stress that alone can change your
Mhm.
blood work. Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really, I think that's a lot of times the seed that really, everything grows from, but I digress. That's a whole nother podcast, right? But I just want to, it might not be like this outwardly thing, like, oh, wow, like I've put on 10 pounds. I mean, you could be thin as a rail, or you could be working out in the gym 5 days a week and thinking that you're on this amazing, what you consider to be diet. Just because you're doing the quote unquote things or you look a certain way doesn't mean that, and again, it's not to, like you said, it's not to create anyone to be, hypochondriacs or be neurotic about it. But I think it's important to get a gauge just in case, because again, you might not, it's like under the hood type of
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned previously about difficulty in getting certain tests. Let me just also, for anybody that does have that issue and that does have that fear, that while the HOMA IR test is not necessarily as common and may not be covered, there are tests that are always going to be included in what your doctor is doing that can help you get a picture into this. And these are things like your HbA1c and your fasting glucose. Those give you, especially HbA1c, it gives you a long-term picture over the past 3 months. What has your blood sugar been doing? And so that's something that your doctor is going to test, ideally no matter what, but it's still worth just making sure, just saying, hey, just making sure that we're gonna be testing this. It's something that I'm mindful of right now. And they should say yes. So there are things that are almost always covered that you can get tested when you go see your doctor for like an annual physical.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And like you said, these things should be covered. Again, I've been having this conversation with a friend of mine recently, and we were going over some of these tests. And I think a lot of times too, it's just we're not used to reading labs, and for good reason. Like we're not the experts. We probably should become a little bit more well versed in this stuff because we need to take our health,
Yeah.
kind of into our own hands and not always lean on everyone else. But we're not the experts, and so some of these markers, like the hemoglobin, for example, that you just mentioned, that is a really good indicator. And then if that's off, then you can go into, okay, this is off.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to explore further.
Exactly. Exactly. And especially in a world today where, if you are in the health and wellness space, which we certainly are, you probably see a lot of these get 157 lab tests done and you'll see everything that you need to know about your health. And, I, it's cool. And if you have the money to do it, sure. But it is not necessary, and you don't need all of that to have a picture into what's going on into your body. And really, there's a reason why there's some kind of standard lab work that physicians do, because those are the ones that generally are going to start setting off alarm bells into any given direction. And then they can start, as you mentioned, add things on from there. So, you know, we can get in some traps and we can always, I am a self-proclaimed perfectionist that is trying to be reformed, but I'm still working on it. And so when I hear about these things like, oh, 175 tests, that sounds really cool. And if I'm going to do it, I should do that one. But it's unnecessary unless you have already done all of the other tests and you still don't know what's going on. And there's things in there that you haven't already done. So
Yeah, yeah. I'm
anyway.
thankful that you said that because there are, and they could be wonderful, but it's not always necessary and feasible financially for people.
Mhm.
I'm one of those people that I just can't be dropping, $400 to $900 on like these huge panels because
Right.
it's just not reasonable for most people today, especially today, right? I mean,
Right.
it's hard enough just buying groceries. So, you do what you can in the season that you're in.
Exactly. And if you're working with a medical practitioner, whoever it might be, whether it's a naturopathic, dietitian, MD, whoever you're working with, they should be able to look at your symptoms and instead of just throwing, like a bunch of darts and seeing what hits, they should be able to do something that is specific and unique to you. And that's another reason why, like, a lot of that stuff is kind of just a money grab. Personal nutrition and personal medicine is so important because we're all so unique and you're gonna get the right care and right support and right investigation specific to you, as long as you're going to see
Yeah.
somebody who's willing to give you that personalized support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another really good tangent. I like this. I really like this. It's got some
We
good
may never get
conversation.
to fasting
I
and
know.
fasting mimicking, but we're
We're on our way there. We're on our way there, friends. No, we are here. We are
yeah.
here because I am going to have Renee now break down for us what is fasting mimicking and how is it how is it different? Because we hear fasting, like I mentioned earlier, we might think intermittent fasting or maybe water fasting or just completely cutting everything out. Well, that is really cutting everything out,
Yeah.
but other things, and that might be a little intrusive for some people, or actually just might not be ideal for some people. I don't think I am the type of person to just go straight to, like, no food,
Yeah.
only water. I don't know. I even think my body would be able to handle that. So why don't you break this down for us in a way that we can understand what is it and how is
Yeah.
it different?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to first talk about, because there's so many things that we can
Yeah.
talk about here. I'm going to start with just generally, we've brought up fasting mimicking. What the heck is it? It's honestly a lot of what it sounds like. Fast mimicking a fast. You are getting to eat, but your body believes that you are fasting. So it is fasting, but with food. And it sounds too good to be true, but this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, it's based on over 30 years of research, really understanding how our body sees fasting. And it turns out, we think about fasting as, did you put food in your mouth or did you not? And that is kind of our dictionary definition of fasting. And it makes sense because it's very kind of black and white. Did you eat or did you not? And it turns out that our cells, which are really kind of the controllers of our body and telling us what we should and shouldn't do and when we do what, they are reading a different dictionary. They have a different definition of what it is to fast. And it was trying to figure out what that was that allowed us to create a fasting mimicking protocol. So it turns out that our cells essentially have alarm bells on their surface, and they are looking not just for is it here or is it not here, but they're looking for specific nutrients and they're looking for them in specific amounts. And it turns out that you can have certain things in certain amounts that just lives right below that threshold, right below that amount before the alarm bells go off and say, hey, food is here. We got to do all of the things that we do when food is here. And so that is fasting mimicking, the ability to just live under those pathways, live under those radars, and let your body to continue to act and behave like it's in a fasted state. Now, from here, I want to talk about something called autophagy. And I'll get there. It's a big word. It's kind of a complex topic. So we'll break it down into little pieces. But really, when we think about some of the most incredible benefits of water only fasting, this is one of those things. And it is this ability for our body to essentially clean its cells from the inside out. And why would we need to do that? Well, every single day that we age, our body just starts accumulating junk. It also starts breaking down. It's kind of like your car. The more you drive it, the more likely certain things are going to fall apart and break or not work as well. And that's why we bring our car in periodically to get it checked and tuned up. And the whole thing isn't going to break down all at once. It's just going to be little pieces here and there that just need to be tweaked and possibly switched out and changed, cleaned, what have you. Our cells need that same tune up and check in periodically because as we age, these things just start to happen. Now, this process of autophagy, this deep cellular cleanup that is automatically turned on by our body, unfortunately only turns on in very specific times. And so one of those times is when we fast. The only other real trigger that we know of right now is very high intensity exercise. Otherwise, your body really isn't. And so those two things, what they have in common and why they're triggering this is that they're stressors to our body. And it turns out that when our body experiences that, it shifts gears. It says, okay, we're going to stop focusing on growing, building, filling things up. We're going to switch gears and we're going to go to repair, cleanup, and rejuvenation. And so we need to get into this water only fasting state. We need to increase the positive stress for a period of time to turn this on. And we need to do that for 3 days. And so this is why the fasting mimicking diet is even more especially beneficial, because if I told you that in order to get all the wonderful benefits of fasting, you could fast for 15 hours, 16 hours, 13 hours, I think a lot of people could wrap their head around that and they could say, I can do this. But now if I tell you that if you're going to get all of these great benefits, you need to water only fast for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, you're probably going to look at me like I'm crazy and say, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. That's just my life it isn't conducive to doing this. And not to mention, you might have some alarm bells go off because what about safety? What about, all of these other concerns? What about, we were just talking about muscle protection. If I go for these long fasts, is my muscle going to be tapped into? And all of those things would be concerns that you should be mindful of if you're going to be doing these long-term water only fasts. And this is why fasting mimicking is so incredible and so beneficial, is because the science has continuously pointed to the fact that it is safe, that it protects muscle with weight loss, and that it is significantly easier to do. And so now we get all of the metabolic, all of the, of course, the wonderful fasting benefits, plus we get to fast for we recommend 5 days, but with food. And so we turn on that autophagy. We get all of the benefits, every single one across the spectrum, from short-term to long-term fasting. So
Good.
I covered a couple of things.
No, that was
Are
great.
there,
That was good.
where should we double down?
I think, first of all, where I kind of want to go is because this is what if I was listening to this just as a listener, I think my first thought would be like, okay, so what would be like the top things that I would see if I completed a 5-day fasting mimicking diet program? Like, what would be some of the highlights, or what would be some of the things that might be subtle or like not so expected that are showing up in a positive way?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the subtle, not so expected one. And this was one that surprised, I think, people in this space. But then kind of was like, oh, of course, of course this happened.
I kind of feel like I might know what you're going to say, but I'm not sure.
I almost want to, do you want to give it a shot?
Can I guess?
Yes.
I think you're going to say something about the skin.
Yes.
Oh
That
my
is exactly where I was going to go. Yes. And that is exactly right, because we are working at a cellular level,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like when we talk about holistic, care, working at the cellular level is like the epitome of holistic care, because your whole body is made up of cells. And so there's so much that if we're tapping into this autophagy, this deep cellular cleanup, that we can achieve. And skin is one of the cool ones that you don't even need to do this fancy test and retest. You can take a picture of your face and the day before you start, and then you can take a picture after the 5 days and you will see it. But we studied it too, right? Yeah. So there was a clinical study done looking at skin texture, skin hydration, fine lines, all after even just 5 days, significantly improved. Like, we're talking 25% type improvements. So these are really quite impactful. And that's also why when you look at a picture, which isn't going to be as granular as what was studied. They were doing these objective, like Visia analyses, these fancy machines that are really looking even below the skin surface, what's going on. But even just from a picture, you will see it. It's pretty cool stuff. So just the power of working from a cellular level. And when people, I think, initially think of fasting, their mind goes to, well, it's there for weight loss. Mm-hmm. And understandably, because I think a lot of people are using it for weight loss. But there is so much more to this. And when we look at the research, that there is a lot of it is in all sorts of spaces that you might not expect, like autoimmune health and cognitive development and even mental health. Like, there's so much research happening here that are in these other spaces because of the impact that working at that cellular level can do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's first of all, backing up to the skin, it's just in my mind, it made sense to me because, okay, now there's a little side note about me, but that's actually that was my trade before. So, I am an esthetician by trade. And so when I think about some of the things that people positively implement, it's funny because a lot of people don't necessarily think or they're not doing it for skin benefits, but
Right.
the skin often will show so much if you're paying attention, even
Yeah.
subtleties, right? Even dark circles, things like that are coming from, just little subtle, little messengers like from organs or the liver or whatever it is. And you can seriously see subtle differences, even up to, like you said, 25% before
Yeah.
in a reduction of, like fine lines or whatnot.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
so, and also because it's this like very large quote unquote organ, I know some people, there are different opinions on that, but it's such a mirror. And so that's why was thinking she's going to go to the skin piece
Yeah.
because, yeah, because it might not be something people expect, but then they're like, whoa, I just look brighter. I feel brighter. I feel like even my eyes look different, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. And, maybe in that same study, because, it was done in a cohort of women between the ages of 35 to about 60. And so another question that they asked was, how has your confidence changed? Now, this is an objective or a more subjective measure where you have to ask somebody how they
Yeah.
feel. But they were able to show, compared to the standard nutrition group alone, there was also an increase in confidence. And that goes a long way too. And we see a lot of really interesting results across motivation, behavior change, cravings. So, like even sugar cravings and things like that after the 5-day fasting mimicking diet because it just plays into so many different places, including your relationship with food. Because for those 5 days, you are just eating a specific protocol. You've got breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks every single day for 5 days, but you're really sticking to that. And just that being mindful for 5 days goes a very, very long way. And in fact, a really cool study, this is one of my personal favorites, was done in patients with type 2 diabetes doing the fasting mimicking diet. They did 5 days a month. So again, like this is a really short intervention period, right? So 5 days a month for 6 months. And there were some really incredible benefits to metabolic health. There was incredible benefits. They were coming off of medication, all these great benefits that maybe perhaps expected, maybe not, depending on who you are. I think it's expected, but it's incredible results. But then on top of that, they just asked the people who did both the standard nutrition or the fasting mimicking diets for the 6-month period. They asked them, how much exercise did you do before? And then they asked them how much did they do after. And they saw this surprising difference. Those that did the standard nutrition dropped their physical activity by 6 hours a week. Those that did the fasting mimicking diet increased their physical activity by 4 hours a week. And so that is, I mean, that's one where you kind of have to scratch your head on. What happened that when we didn't tell anybody in this study that they had to work out or do any physical activity, that wasn't even part of the protocol. It was just something that they asked to see how things were different. And what the researchers had to, I mean, of course, assume is that because these individuals one, only had to do 5 days of nutrition change a month, as opposed to every single day nutrition change. They had 25 days to think about other things that they could do for their health, right? They also had their muscle protected. We didn't really go into this too much yet, but fasting mimicking diet has consistently shown that there is muscle protection. So they feel strong still. And then the last piece is this sense of accomplishment. After you complete these 5 days, you get this just feeling that you did something really good for yourself and you feel great and you notice a difference, right? You see, like honestly, I will, all my senses are heightened. I can tell that I did something really great for my body. And so you get all of this combined. And so it makes sense that you might be additionally motivated to do other things beyond just nutrition changes alone.
Yeah, again, like you were pointing to earlier with community, it's like these intrinsic little changes that really can make a big impact. So that's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah.
I have an interesting question, and I'm not sure. Well, okay, because I know that, and I'm going to ask you who this is really geared towards and who it's not geared towards. But first off, for someone who might be in like a woman specifically who is in like the middle stage of life, who might be floating right into that perimenopausal stage, or maybe even they're in the midst of menopause, how
Yes.
would something like fasting mimicking impact their current state?
I love this question because this is such an important topic. And I am a big believer in personalized nutrition and adjusting programs for the individual. So everything that I'm saying, by the way, is under the assumption that you're generally like kind of a healthy adult. There are going to be adjustments to everything that I say as you veer away from these things. Now, when we look at women, especially perimenopausal or even postmenopausal, there's additional considerations that we have to be mindful of. Now, this is a period of time where estrogen, progesterone are starting to drop, and that unfortunately is also paired with a slew of other things that unfortunately we have to start being especially mindful of. One of those things, estrogen, is one of the protectors of our muscle. And so much of so what we usually see is that muscle is dropping. And so when we're eating the same things that we did before, our body, the metabolism isn't at quite where it was before because of that, oftentimes that drop in muscle, right? And so we could be doing the exact same thing we were doing before, but it's not having the same impact as it had before. And so sometimes the initial thought is, well, I should eat less. But then what we oftentimes see is that then your muscle goes down even more. And so that is a huge problem in just the way that we are educating around this time of life that is totally normal and is just it's part of our aging process. And so we all are going to go through it as women at some point, and for some earlier than others. It can start as even before the age of 30 in a small select group of people, and is usually on average by the age of 52. But perimenopause, that period before where a lot of these things can start beginning, can be 5-7 years of time for some people, and about on average it's about 3 or 4. So this is going to be a long period of time where things are going to seem to start shifting, and it can happen very gradually at first. But just like being mindful and aware of that is definitely part of the puzzle. So in that population, especially, we want to be mindful of muscle protection. We also want to be mindful of bone health because estrogen also protects our bones. We also, and everyone's going to be experiencing this differently, but the influx and changing in hormones also is what's prompting a lot of these hot flashes and some of these sleep disturbances and things like that. It also triggers, unfortunately, increased likelihood of that insulin resistance that we were just chatting about before. And so also being very mindful about our nutrition so that we're supporting a healthy insulin resistance level. So all of those things, muscle protection, insulin resistance, healthy aging, and proper cellular aging, those are all things that are tapped into by prolonged fasts. These are fasts that are over 5 days. And so that is a really, really great tool to add in. Now, I think it's also important to note how often we want people to do this, because we only want people to do the 5 day fast. For most generally healthy women and men, it's about 3 times a year. That's it. That is it. And I think that's so important because, the other piece of this puzzle is stress. And especially in perimenopausal women, um, cortisol is also another hormone that is going to be fluctuating along with all of this. And even prior to perimenopause, when we wake up in the morning, it is a natural influx of cortisol. It kind of like shoots up and it's telling us to, be awake, be alert, and go get food. Go hunt down some food, and we'll keep you in a place where you can be not starving so that you can go find food. That's part of what this cortisol response is. But with fasting, what we also are doing, and I mentioned it earlier, one of the benefits of fasting is that it increases stress, a positive hermetic stress. But there's too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And this is especially true, I think, in perimenopause. And so we don't want to exert excess stress on the body. And that's why these long, 16-hour fasts every single day that are causing your body additional stress can be, especially water only fasts, can be possibly detrimental and not beneficial. And so in those populations, I urge people to consider doing one, fasting mimicking, because you get nutrients, you get nutrition, you get additional support during these periods of time. And we have daily intermittent fasting mimicking solutions, and we have these longer term fasting mimicking solutions. I urge do 3 fasting mimicking protocols a year and just fit those in periodically. Those are going to help with that cleanup, the rejuvenation, the cellular repair, that will also help just with healthy aging. And I would also urge that if you are going to do a intermittent fasting protocol on an everyday basis, if that feels like that resonates with you, then think about doing shorter intermittent fasts. So 14 hours if you are looking for weight loss and 12 hours if you are not. It doesn't sound like an intermittent fast, but it is. Fasting, I mean, truly, if you don't eat for an hour, could be considered a 1 hour fast. So, we shouldn't scoff at these 12-hour fasts. Those are these natural circadian fasts that our bodies have evolved to be in. That is, in fact, what maybe the most natural period of time. So somewhere between 12 to 14 will limit the stress on your body. And then finally, the last piece is that shifting your eating window. So if you can, and I will say it for the third time, if you can, because it's all about what you're willing to do, right? But if it's possible for you to have breakfast within about an hour or so of waking and try and stop eating at least 3 hours before bed, that is the better shift for your intermittent fasting window. So eating in the morning and stopping earlier in the evening. So many people, when they're doing these intermittent fasting protocols, they're shifting them. So they're like, I can hold off on eating until later, and then I get to have this really big dinner at the end of the day. There's a lot of reasons why that can be problematic, but especially when we're talking about this perimenopausal space, that cortisol spike in the morning, it's not going to go down unless you have that breakfast meal. And so you're causing your body to have this high stress response for a very long period of time that is very likely not the safest and the healthiest for your body. And then the other piece of that puzzle is that in the evening, our bodies are less effective at taking sugar out of our blood and funneling it away. So it is less insulin sensitive or has higher insulin resistance in the evening. That is just a natural way that our body is. Our body kind of lives on these clocks. So, it knows when things are going to be a little bit better for X, Y, or Z naturally. But unfortunately, because we like to hack the system and we like to do things our own way, and maybe we like to have, a special treat at 10 p.m. That's not what our body was planning for. It's not what it was designed for. And so it doesn't know how to always respond as well when we try and kind of push against that natural grain. So that was a lot, but those are kind of it's so important for especially women, and especially women that are in perimenopause and even postmenopause, when things are changing and we don't have estrogen on our side to, as much as it was in the past anyway, to help support with so many of these, healthy bodily processes that were happening in the past, to know how the right way to fast is. And that's why I think so many people nowadays are saying fasting is bad for women. You don't do it. I think it's a bit of this like reactionary, like, oh well, it's got to be bad. But it's rather that there's all these different types of fasting, all these different ways of fasting, and it's important that you tailor the way that you fast to you and yeah,
That
to your
was,
body system.
yeah. I am so grateful that you dove into it the way that you did because I actually have some feedback for you on a couple different things.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic explanation. And I think the first thing I want to say is that I love going back to the beginning of that. I love that you said that too much of anything good can actually be bad because I feel like that is an underrated, underestimated truth. And we are, to your point, we're the type of species that like is balls to the wall for lack of better terminology, right? Just like go full throttle, let's do it all, let's 110. I mean, when we're into something, I mean, not everybody, but like,
Yeah.
so a lot of times more is not better. Okay, that's the first thing. So love that. Number two, I was actually somebody who was very turned off from the whole entire fasting idea, community, whatever, because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
And I love that you highlighted the fact that it is so individual. It has to be tailored to your body, to your season, to where you're at age wise, even sex that matters. There's so many considerations that need to be taken, and it's not just about, because I understand there's different avenues that people have concerns about here. Like some people can kind of get into disordered eating when they
Hmm.
fast. And that's a whole nother talk. Again, that's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah.
And so you have to take all these things into consideration, where your mental health is at, lots of different things. So I feel like that is so important. And then the third and final note that I want to say is that when you were talking about, specifically the menopausal or the perimenopausal, I feel like a lot of maybe the standard intermittent fasting, like maybe the windows were too long. Maybe take, say a woman was doing it in her 30s and like, her window was like 16 hours or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
That I think could and has had an impact on how they weather the whole menopausal experience,
Hmm.
because it could have done some, and I hate to use the word damage, but it could have actually ended up lowering, I don't even really know the word to use, but like metabolically, she may or may not have been in like maybe not as an efficient of a space
Hmm.
come menopause or come perimenopause, because this intermittent fasting was a little too much stress on the body. What say you about that?
I think so. I hate to hypothesize too much because, I've trained on evidence-based nutrition, and so that is what I always have to lean on. Now, hypothetically, I think that absolutely stressing your body for too long, we do know that, I mean, this is relatively well accepted that having high levels of cortisol and stress hormones prolonged for too long is going to cause damage to your system. Now, how that might impact your menopausal symptoms, I'm not going to hypothesize on that, but we know that your system is going to be under duress over that period of time. So
Good.
possibly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just because there's so much connection. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we
It's all connected.
isolate, right? Like we like look, whether it's organs, whether it's, physical health is isolated from mental health, and mental health is isolated from, whatever,
Yeah.
spiritual health, whatever it is. It's like, but at the end of the day, it's all connected. And I would venture to say that stress, and again, I'm no expert, it's just I'm sitting over here just brainstorming as you're talking,
Yeah.
but that when we are under any kind of stress, and stress means a million different things, right?
Hmm.
It can be you're taxed because of a job. It could be that you're taxed because you have a 16, 17-hour window of fasting every day and you're 35 years old. It could be the fact that you've got three kids and you're just in that mom mode and you're stressed and your lack of sleep. I mean, there's a million stress and traffic. I mean, there's a million different things that is stress, but a
Exactly.
prolonged period of that, there is going to be potentially, as I've seen in my own life, some fallout, and that might affect things down the line, like the way that you handle menopause or the way that you handle whatever stage it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one other thing that I think is worth noting specifically in this space of perimenopause and menopause, which I briefly touched on, but I didn't really dive into, is the concept of biological aging.
Mm.
And so our cells can have a different age than our, birth certificate or our passport or whatever. And it turns out that you can impact what that age is by the choices that you make. You can shift it to older or you can shift it to younger, just based off of the lifestyle choices that you have. And what's really cool about the fasting mimicking diet is that they recently did a study, just last year it was published actually, and it showed that with just 3 cycles of the fasting mimicking diet, they were able to reverse the biological age, so the age that your cells behave, by 2.5 years.
Wow.
Which is huge. I mean, in the world of longevity research, to get with a total of 15 days of intervention over 90-day period, so that's pretty limited work on somebody's behalf, to get that much of an improvement in your biological age is really unheard of. So that is also, especially in this a time of our lives where we are aging. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do. We get every day we get older, we get older. That's true for every human being, right? But we can change the age that our cells behave. And so by working, against that biological age, we're able to tap into a lot of different things. And one of those things is, yes, the insulin resistance and the blood sugar control, but there's a bunch of other things that are considered the biological age question, which also includes markers of inflammation, your blood pressure, things like that. So, it really considers a whole spectrum of things that are associated with aging.
Yeah, yeah, good points. I love that. So, in terms of the diet or, this 5 day, what first of all, you sort of answered it already, but men and women, I mean, is it geared more towards one than the other? And also, who should not be doing something like this and calorie restricting? Because I have a feeling that there's probably a crop of people out there that should be very mindful and or avoid.
Yes. So, generally speaking, I like to think first, let me just say that most people are going to be a great candidate for fasting mimicking. It's specifically designed to be a more approachable, safer option. But there are, of course, always going to be groups that we want to avoid or at least have very careful doctor supervision if before moving forward. And those are going to be definitely no on anybody who's pregnant or breastfeeding, anybody who has a history of eating disorders or disordered eating, anybody who has very low muscle mass to start with. So while yes, it is muscle protective, you don't want to go into this. You would want to be focusing on building muscle first before doing something like this. Individuals over the age of 65 or 75, it's starting to increase actually as we do more and more research. But those individuals should just consult with their physician first and make sure that they're generally healthy and able to move forward. And then, of course, anybody who has any significant health concerns, late stage, any of these like cardiometabolic health concerns, you'd want to speak with your physician again first before doing this.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that you tackled the whole muscle, because that was going to be a question of mine, is that what
Yeah.
if you are, and honestly, I'd probably fall somewhat into that category, but I don't necessarily, I don't know if I fall like hard into it, but having less muscle than I used to, that was actually something that popped up for me was like, oh gosh, but you said that with fasting mimicking, it is quite different than a standard fast because it really is more protective and it might not be something where, you're just all of a sudden it's like you've dropped 4 pounds and it's all muscle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the beauty of prioritization. I always like to remind people that if you're not going to do fasting mimicking right now, that's totally fine because you could do it next year. Let's get you in a place where your body is ready to do this. Let's not jump the gun if it's not the right time, and it might not be the right time if right now the focus is on growth and building muscle, and it's what's really interesting is that your body really kind of picks one or the other. It's either in a growth mode or it's in the repair and rejuvenation mode. Now, like if I'm working with an athlete or, somebody who is, of course, very mindful of their muscular tone and their muscular health, they need that. I'm still going to use a fasting mimicking diet because it's going to be muscle protective for them. And they're going to get this really incredible cleanup that when for pretty much every other day of their life, they're just telling their body, go, grow, 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 grow. What's happening is that they are just very quickly building up a bunch of waste. It's kind of like I've started using this analogy of like you buy a house and you start making enough money that you can start buying stuff. And every time you get a new paycheck, you just buy more stuff and you buy more stuff and more stuff to the point where all of a sudden you can't even walk around in your home. You need to take a moment to do a spring cleaning and kind of a clear out, a garage sale, whatever you want to call it, and get rid of some stuff so that you have space, some clean space, and then you can replace with newer, better stuff. But if you just kept filling it up, you wouldn't be able to move in your home. You wouldn't be able to do anything because your house can't get any bigger. I mean, you could buy up, but this it defeats the analogy. For this analogy, you have your one-sized home, but that's what's happening in our cells. And so, especially for people that are really building and having very high protein diets, really focused on muscle building, this could be maybe the most important thing that they could do to just give themselves just a quick cleanup, just 3 times a year. Do it in your off season, just to give yourself that time to flush out.
Got it. Got it. So now I'm sure what everyone is probably wondering is what does a day in the life of this look like? So what are we doing? What are we eating and what are we drinking? And obviously, I'm sure that we're sticking to, I can gauge, probably we're sticking to what's provided and we don't really want to veer off. But give us a clue into this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk about my personal preference, and I have to disclose I am the director of education for L Nutra, the makers of Prolon, but it is the only commercially available fasting mimicking diet. There is a world where you could hypothetically try and make it yourself. Dr. Walter Longo, in his book here, outlines a little bit about how you could hypothetically do that. But I personally would never advise any of my patients to do that because it is the likelihood if you make one mistake. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
We'll get through that. But I would personally not advise any of my patients to try making their own fasting mimicking diet because the risk of possibly adding one ingredient too much or one thing in the wrong direction, and now all of a sudden you've broken your fast. And so that's why I love the Prolon fasting mimicking diet because it takes all of the guesswork out of everything. You get a box with 5 individual boxes within the box, and each one of those 5 boxes has everything you need for that day. So your day 1 box has a breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, supplements, teas, truly everything that you will need. And all you have to do is rehydrate the soups. The breakfast bar is ready to go. All of the snacks are ready to go. So it's really, really kind of this simple way to go through this protocol. Some people really like it for that reason because they don't have to think about what the heck they're going to have for dinner or what they're going to do here.
That would be my thing. I'd be like, thank God I don't have to think about this for 5 days.
Exactly. And also another, fun fact here is that because the pricing is very reasonable, a lot of people save money because they're not going out for lunch and dinners. And so you end up either spending the same that you would on food, or even in some cases, depending where you live and how you consume your nutrition, can save you money.
Yeah, no, it is. It is pretty reasonable. And there's actually I was sort of looking at it myself this weekend, and there's some very appetizing little thing. I'm a huge olive fan, and I know that there was some olives in there, and I was like,
And
ooh.
there are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just,
And these
like,
olives, by the way, for anybody who's not, because I would say that the olives are probably the most like conflicting
oh,
item in there because some people hate
hate
olives.
olives.
And but these, and I used to be one of the olive haters, and those ones are really really good. They're flown in direct from Italy, and very high quality with herbs and spices and olive oil. I mean, it is it. If you are not an olive lover, try these
Try
ones and
them.
you'll be surprised. You'll be converted.
That's awesome. No, I am a huge, like, I can sit to a whole jar at one time. It's pretty ridiculous. And so yeah, I grew up
I
in
love it.
yeah, I grew up in a very, Italian, Middle Eastern family. And so, there was olives with every meal and I never got tired of them. So yeah, love
Well,
them.
they're great, and they're in the longevity diet.
Yeah.
So, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
And just generally speaking about this too, everything is in this kit, so you don't really have to think about this, but it is also fully plant-based, and and that is an important feature of this protocol, because I kind of hinted at protein in the past, but one of the fastest ways to trigger your body to grow. Um, and accumulate waste and damage over time is with animal protein. And so, while, I'm not necessarily saying you have to exclude all animal protein, but I am saying that you need to give your body a moment to chill out and give it a bit of a break from all of that kind of massive push to constantly grow. And that is why this protocol is fully plant-based, because it's using a little bit of protein, not too much, really, just to let your body be in this fully fasted state, and all plant-based proteins, as to not trigger any of those nutrient sensing pathways or alarm bells on the cell.
That makes total sense to me. I mean, I am far from plant-based in terms of my diet, but that makes 100% sense to me in
Yeah,
terms of just giving your body a little bit of rest, because a lot of
exactly.
times that's the rejuvenation factor, right? That's what it needs. So
Yeah,
that makes sense
exactly.
to me. Is there caffeine in this? I'm assuming no. I didn't look that that far into it, but I think that these teas, to my knowledge, they're herbal, right? I just
They
wanted to.
are herbal
Okay.
teas. So
Okay.
the general recommendation is to go caffeineless for the 5 day period. And that's really more than anything, just as a piece of the reset, a piece of the disconnection, the piece of, this stepping away from all of these things that we are so tied to. Now, that being said, if it seems impossible, if the idea of cutting your morning coffee from your routine is going to prevent you from moving forward, then the adjustment is that you can have up to 140 milligrams of caffeine a day, just making sure that it's either just pure black coffee or pure like green black tea.
Okay. Okay.
So
I was
it's
thinking like
open and
even like if you switched from coffee to matcha for a few days or something of that nature, as long as there was no dairy involved, that might be a better switch than, for those people that are just like, I cannot live without it.
yes, exactly, exactly. So, I would say just make sure that there's no additives. Just keep it super clean. So no oat milk, no almond milk, not even stevia. Just keep it simple.
Awesome. And then I think, unless there's anything else that you can think of or want to touch on, I think my last question for you is there a way that we need to prepare for going into a 5 day fasting mimicking diet? And then the second part of the question would be come out of it. Is there a way to come out of it that is not only appropriate, but definitely something that we should be mindful of?
Absolutely. So, in terms of entering in, I mean, the whole purpose of the fasting mimicking diet was to make it far more accessible with very limited prep work needed. And so, hypothetically, you can just dive right on in. Now, that being said, I always like to remind people like there's sometimes this urge to thinking you're going into this fast or this protocol to have like a big meal on the night before and kind of binge your favorite, quote unquote unhealthy dish the night before. And I would just urge you not to do that, as fun as that might sound, because it's just going to honestly make the next day harder. And it could also impact how quickly you're able to even get into this fast. So just keeping it light, have your dinner on the night before, And if you can for like that day, like try and limit refined sugars and things like that because you're about to enter into that. And the sooner you can start, living in that space, the easier the transitions become as you go through the protocol. Now, in terms of the transition day, again, it's a relatively short transition. I would just say that for day 6 or that day after completing, there's a couple things to be mindful of. One is make sure that you do eat. A lot of people, after they're done day 5, they get into day 6 thinking like they're going to want to eat anything in sight. But turns out that their body is just so in it and they're feeling so good and they're feeling so clean that I've had a lot of people say, "Hey, Renee, do I have to eat at all? Like,
I
can
see
I
that.
can I prolong this fast another 3 days, 4 days? I just feel so good." And it is so important to break your fast. We said it before, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. There's a reason why it was designed as a 5-day protocol. You trigger that autophagy on day 3, and you've lived in it now for about 3 days. That is plenty. No need to keep going. And you're going to do this again in like, 3 to 4 months. And that is enough. That's the way that it was designed. So definitely resume eating. It allows your body to rebuild from what you've cleaned out. And then the other piece is, try and again, be mindful of what you've been consuming over the last 5 days and stay kind of within that framework. So limiting animal protein for just that day 6. Trying to avoid addition don't like alcohol, additional added sugars and refined grains and things like that. Just try and keep it clean on that return day. And then some people do like to slowly resume back to full solids. So maybe they'll start with like a smoothie or like an avocado toast that is just a little bit lighter in the morning, and then go to like a minestrone soup or something like that, and then go into a salad. And then that could be your first day, just kind of a, as an example, but it doesn't have to be exactly that. Just kind of just gradually easing back in.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. I feel like I would be the type of person that would get to day 6 and go, well, it's not that I don't want to eat because I do.
Yeah.
But I'm like almost like, shoot, what should I eat? Right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think I'd be the person to dive right back into my eggs and I would probably be like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, let's do this with thought because,
Yeah.
almost not scared, but almost like, oh, I don't know if I want to stop this, like I feel great.
Well, it's because you feel so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I will say like I mean, I've done this. I'm coming up to my 15th time this month.
Oh, wow.
And I have had days where I didn't think I wanted to eat at all. I've had days where I went out for a burger. I've only done that one time. I will never ever ever do it again. It was
Oh, no.
your body, that's when you know that you did really great work because when you have a burger after that, your body's like, what the heck
What
is
is
this?
this?
Absolutely not. We are not happy with you. So I've done it in many different of ways, and everybody's a little bit different, and even each individual will have a different experience every single time. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
just
that's important to note because I think what happens with your neighbor might not be exactly the same exact thing, or you might not see the same exact thing or the same exact, I don't want to say symptoms, but the same occurrences. It's really individual because your body is different than your neighbor's body. Bottom line.
exactly. And this is the beauty of fasting mimicking is that because it's working at a cellular level and it's working really at root cause of things, um, the downstream effects of that could be so different from person to person. Now, these are just case studies of things that I've heard just from I run these very big group fasts. And people will be like, oh, I can't believe it. I had this rash on my arm for the last 3 years and it's gone now. Just like little things like that we haven't studied and we haven't necessarily been specifically focused on, but that's one of these downstream effects. So just this concept that because we're working at the root cause, it'll affect everybody a little bit differently is just really good to know because it's showing that the root cause is being tapped into. And anybody who is going to tell you anything about the best protocols for you is going to tell you, of course, start at the root. You don't just work at all the symptoms at the end of this river because then you'll constantly be fighting each symptom at the end. as opposed to going at the very, very tip top and preventing all of the junk to get downstream.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense because our individual bodies display anything inflammatory so differently. And so, it's like it's going to vary person to person because not everybody has the same inflammatory symptoms. And so it's just so natural to us, to be like, oh, wow, like you said, the rash on someone's arm, like that
Yeah.
cleared up. Well, it might be the whatever the weight loss in person B
Right.
or the eczema in person C or
Yeah.
whatever the case is, or even just like the glowy skin like you said, or the
Yeah.
more energy. I mean, it's gonna vary person to person, so that makes a lot of sense. It's just the body is so fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. Ugh, it really is. I mean, we did such a cool study where we did what they call a post hoc analysis where they pulled out people from each group. And so what they would do is they would say, okay, your blood sugar at the beginning of this was already pretty high and your blood sugar was pretty good. So let's see whose blood sugar changes how. And they saw that the person who already had it healthy stayed at a healthy level. The person who is at a high level dropped down to the healthy level. Then take these same two people. The person who had a healthy blood sugar actually has very high blood pressure. The person who has very high blood sugar actually has a normal blood pressure. This person stayed normal, and the person who had high blood pressure dropped down to a normal level. And it's just that like fun little way that it's finessing. It's letting your body do the work, and it knows where to spend its time and energy. So that plays really well into safety because people who are already healthy aren't getting lower, and people that need it are getting improvements there. So it's just that's a really cool study. It was in our healthy subjects trial in 2017.
Amazing. Gosh, yeah. It's a work of art and a machine that I think that as long as we are walking this earth, we are never going to really know and be able to tap into all just the absolutely miraculous and divine ways that it works. I just think no matter how much science goes into things, our body is so beautifully made, and I can't wrap my head around it.
Mhm.
But, we have been, just to sort of tie up here, we have been so programmed, as we kind of discussed in the beginning of this episode, to look at it as a body that, or excuse me, a machine or a whatever that breaks down, But the reality is that it's doing everything in its power to adapt and to keep us afloat and to heal, even when you don't feel good. And I know that firsthand. I've been down a really, really, really rough road. And even through the rough road, I know that my body is working for me. And
Yes.
it's so just, it's magnificent in all of the ways that it's trying to elevate. And like I said, keep us afloat and keep us going, even when it doesn't feel so hot. So it's just super fascinating. And, there's so much gratitude I have surrounding it.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I couldn't agree more. There's just I sometimes it's so easy to forget all of the things that are happening inside of our own bodies. And it's crazy. There is an entire new universe inside of our own bodies. There is like, it's not one factory, it's millions and billions of factories throughout our body that
Yes.
have each their own managers and systems within them. Like it is, it's so cool to think that our bodies are behaving this way. And when we take a step back and we look at that, we can really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well said. So well said. So, I want you to tell us, where can people learn more about Prolon, which is the company that you work with and who provides the 5-day fast? Where can people learn more about it, social media, website, etc., and also more about you if they want to follow you and your work and all of that. And also, I know that we're going to discuss a little bit of an option for a listener code for people. So why don't we dive into that real quick as we land the plane here?
Beautiful. So, if I'd love to hear from anybody. If you have more questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me at Fitton Nutrition on Instagram. That is Fitton Nutrition on Instagram. And then, if you want to learn more about Prolon, go to prolonlife.com. That is going to be where you can investigate and learn more there. And then we are going to also be sharing a link in the information in the show notes where you can access Prolon at a significant discount. So please go check that out as well. And it will drop you on a page where the discount is automatically applied, but it'll also allow you to investigate and explore because it'll be on that Prolon Life website. So we absolutely urge you to do more digging. We really only scratched the surface. Whether it is reaching out to me, exploring on Prolon Life, we're happy to chat with you.
Awesome. And like Renee said, you guys, all of this thing, or all of these things, all of these will be offered in the show notes. They will be there for you and listed for you as always. If you have and I always say this, but it's because sometimes people, it's okay. There's a lot of information out there. Sometimes people can't find things. So if you cannot find something, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will point you in the right direction or at least do my best. And I'm sure Renee feels the same way. If you reach out to her, she'll be happy to help. And again, that link, we will have it for you and it will be listed at the top of the show notes when you visit it. So again, all of these details will be there for you. Well, I will say that I'm looking forward to doing this myself, whether it is, in a month or even in a year, because like you said, individuality is key. And so it's something that is very appealing to me. It's something that I can see being very much a tool to elevate my own personal health. And so I've learned so much just in talking with you. So I really, really, really appreciate all of the wisdom that you've offered us and just such great information. So thank you so much for being here, Renee. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I could talk about this all day, honestly. So you'll have to kick me off before I keep rambling on. But yeah, feel free, as I said, reach out to me with any questions because I would love to talk about this more. It's been such a fun time. It's been such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Well, the honor and the pleasure is mine, and I'm with you. I feel like we could probably go for another several hours if we
Yeah.
didn't physically stop ourselves. But again, thank you for being here. It's been such just a really a fun discussion and something that I think is going to provide a lot of insight for people. So thank you. And my friends, again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And until the next episode, I hope that you all have a beautiful and blessed day.